Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we're going to have a little chat about the Blood Ravens, because they are getting their own entry in the Index Astartes. They're going to be getting their own unique Blood Ravens flavour that will actually impact the way that your Blood Ravens army fight, or indeed your chapter that you will use the Blood Ravens stuff for. Because let's face it, it's not just them. If you've got your own homebrew chapter, you could totally use their rules for that. And a lot of the stuff that I've seen regarding their upcoming Index Astartes is essentially around the most popular part of the Blood Ravens. I mean, there's been a little bit of chatter about why Blood Ravens, but to be honest, the answer to that is because they're popular. I mean, Dawn of War 1, Dawn of War 2, both excellent games. We won't talk about Dawn of War 3. Despite the actual not goodness that was Dawn of War 3, the Blood Ravens have not become less popular. They are still as beloved as they were to begin with, and so it kind of makes sense to me that they'd get something. It's a nice kind of crossover thing, whereby a chapter that has achieved popularity through video games are getting recognised once again, because they've already had a lot of recognition from Games Workshop one way or another. They're getting something for that, which is nice, and more options are never bad anyway. But there's one particular thing about the Blood Ravens that is the most popular thing, and it's the thing I've seen thrown around the most in terms of what could they get in terms of unique rules. And it's the fact that they nick stuff. They are nicknamed the Blood Magpies for a reason, and it would be kind of neat if they had, some sort of stratagem or some sort of relic-based access system that meant that they could show off their vast collection of shit that quite clearly does not belong to them. But I am going to try and make the case that actually that wouldn't be all that interesting. That is one of those things whereby it would be funny, don't get me wrong, and it would show a definite sense of humour amongst the rule designers at Games Workshop, but I think it would lose the funny pretty quickly. It would go from being, they went with the thing whereby they said, oh yeah, the Blood Ravens nick a load of stuff. They take anything that isn't nailed down, that's funny. It will go from that to, they're not actually usable though, are they? Quite quickly. Or at least the benefit of that would probably not outweigh the cons of not getting something that was actually reasonably useful in more situations. See, the thing with the Blood Ravens is they are a beloved chapter. People do like them, but they are also kind of silly. And they're kind of silly for actually a very simple reason, and it's not like they were set out to be made silly, or there was something done whereby it was a case of, okay, how do we make the Blood Ravens as daft as possible? It's not like anyone sat there and actually went for that approach. It's because, it's easy. It's because of the mechanics of the games, especially Dawn of War 2. I mean, Dawn of War 2, I think, is the biggest culprit in a way. It was the combination of gameplay elements, wasn't it? It was the fact that it was an RTS, but it also had a loot system. So pretty much any time you complete a level, especially in Dawn of War 2, you would get multiple items of loot. You get loads of loot. Loot just coming out of your ears. There would be something to upgrade a squad pretty much every time you played. And whilst that works really, really well in terms of video game stuff, in terms of tabletop and in terms of chapter lore, it becomes absurd very, very quickly. I mean, if you actually take what the Blood Ravens have access to in the games and placed it in a codex, they would have more stuff than every chapter combined. Half the book would be the loot that they've found over the years, and that's not something that I think can really be reflected very well in the rules, unless you gave them some sort of insane customizable system whereby you could take a weapon and apply an attribute to it and then apply another attribute to it and give it a restriction as to who it could be given to. There's no way that any rule system is going to accurately portray what the Blood Ravens are actually capable of when it comes to finding relics. And there is the idea perhaps of saying, well, Blood Ravens can take relics from any chapter. And that would be funny, and that would be cool. But that would also slightly misunderstand exactly what was going on in those games, like in the Dawn of War series. A lot of the stuff that the Blood Ravens find aren't actually the relics of other chapters. There is a lot of hearsay, there's a lot of rumour, there's a lot of this is said to be. And of course, this is said to be is not the same as this actually is. I mean, I forget which game it is, but an example being that there is a sword that they have that is said to be a cousin to Azrael's sword from the Dark Angels. The keyword being said to be. It was said to be by some serf who probably died 200 years ago. As such, that information, not vastly reliable. There are so many named items, there are so many things whereby it's like the armour of so-and-so from the Ultramarines' first company or whatever, that you couldn't accurately portray that. And if you did try and accurately portray that, it would go from being the Blood Ravens steal everything as a joke to just the Blood Ravens actually do steal everything. The ability to take other chapters' relics, for instance, being a very good way to interpret the sheer absurdity of how many relics they have, that would actually cross the line slightly into, at this point, aren't these guys actually just traitors? Like, we know it's borderline, we know they've had a bit of trouble in the past with the old being loyal to the Imperium and not nearly falling entirely to chaos and all of that stuff, but you get to a point and suddenly they are just like nicking shit off the Space Wolves, which is not really the done thing. It's also quite a difficult thing to implement in a way. If you say that they have access to all relics from all chapters, I'd hope you like buying entire codexes to look at relics, because that's what you should have to do if you are going to actually use that rule, let's be honest. The Blood Ravens are in a weird position whereby the actually most interesting thing to me about them is something that I think would take more than Index Astartes to actually portray, which is an unusual number of psychers. Going way back, they have talked about the number of psychers. I think it said in the first company alone there were like 20 psychers. The Blood Ravens do have a... It's not represented well in the video games, but in the lore that Games Workshop has put out over the years, they do have an overabundance of the psychically gifted, which would actually be a way more interesting thing to bring up than the whole take everything that's not nailed down side of them. That side of things is funny. Actually having something that could impact play, that could be almost a Grey Knight's Light type situation where, you know, there are some chapters where you can take someone in Terminator armor in a standard squad. What if you could have a librarian in a standard squad, or you could have a psyker of some description, perhaps not of the same level, but able to manifest smite or something of that nature? It would play a lot into the more serious, more interesting side of the Blood Ravens, which is their you know, not checkered past, but their unknown heritage, their psychic potential. There's stuff there that could be converted into interesting stuff for Index Astartes without just veering immediately into meme territory. I mean, meme territory is great, and meme territory is where half the content of most of the stuff online for 40k comes from. But in terms of an actual playable chapter, giving a chapter a nice spin on things, more could be done, you know? More could be done than they steal stuff. They have, you know, a history of this unusual number of psychers. They have a preferred method of going into battle. I mean, even if we're going to stick with the thing of just taking what the video games do, I mean, pretty much every single mission on Dawn of War 2 involved arriving via drop pod. Actually having an army that made extensive use of drop pods and, you know, had stratagems and rules based around that, that'd be way more interesting to me than they nick stuff. It's one of those things whereby I think they could go either way and people would be happy, but one is more suited to the tabletop than the other, and I think that's the main thing. The whole thing of they just collect relics from everywhere and the relics belong to God knows what chapter and they don't care, they keep it anyway. That works in a video game format. That works in a video game format because it has to fit the mechanics of the game. That's more a case of, well, okay, we can't just have them picking up bolters and power swords and thunder hammers all over the shop that are unnamed but mysteriously way better than the previous thing they were using. What do? Well, you have to turn them into something interesting, and a way to do that is to drop a bit of flavour text in there. Admittedly, the flavour text does make it look like they are just hoarding every interesting item in that universe, but it's a way round that mix of mechanics, and it's a way to make it seem more interesting than it otherwise would be. let's be totally honest. That works in the video game, but it doesn't necessarily work on the tabletop. But there's so much more about the Blood Ravens that actually does work on the tabletop. You know, there are avenues through which to explore them that I think would work better in Index Astartes than they do in the video game. So I don't really know what to expect from this when it does drop. I've no idea. I don't know what direction they're going to go. I don't know whether they're going to focus on, you know, like drop pod assault. I don't know whether they're going to bring up the fact that they've got an unusual number of psychers. What I'm hoping is that they don't revolve everything around around essentially a joke that was born out of a mechanical choice for the video game, because that joke works well for that. Would it actually be entertaining enough to consistently be worth using on the tabletop? Possibly not. I mean, we'll have to see. But yeah, I've just been thinking about this a little while because I started playing Dawn of War 2 again. Once it was leaked, you know, once it was shown that it was going on, that we were going to have the Blood Ravens Index Astartes, I immediately started playing Dawn of War 2 again. I think this might be, I don't know how many times I've played through that game at this point. A probably stupid number, but yeah, it's just something that I've been thinking about and reading about a little bit, so there you go. Let me know what you would like to see out of their Index Astartes in the comments down below. Do you think they should go for the stealing everything that isn't nailed down approach? Do you think they should maybe build on the fact that they do have this unusual number of cycles, or at least they used to? That used to be part of the lore for them. Or perhaps something that does focus on their love of drop pods, which is video game related, but still applicable to the tabletop in a more reasonable way. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. In the meantime, feel free to click all the things, Patreon, video subscribe, all that stuff. Patreon, if you would like to help out the channel. YouTube is a hilarious ad nightmare at the moment, as it always is, every 2 months or so at this point, I think is how it's going. If you don't want to do that, there is an affiliate link down below that goes to Element Games, and if you buy something using that link, I get a little something. You don't have to spend any more, you actually save a bit because they have 15 to 25% off all of their Warhammer 40k and every other game known to man available, so you just click that and do what you like with it. Or don't, it's entirely up to you. I am attempting to find a US version of that because a good number of you, every time I mention it, which I do try and keep to the end of the video, I mostly try and keep this at the end because I know most of you stopped watching at this point. I'm tempted to say, if you are still watching, then say the word that I'm not going to go there. It would be too depressing to find that no one watches beyond 3 minutes. But I am trying to find a US version of that because there are those of you in the US who keep asking for it. I cannot find well, I say I cannot find. I'm looking into it. I've maybe found a couple of places that do something similar, but I will let you know when I've made any progress on that. So yeah, click all the shit if you like. Don't click if you don't want to. And I will see you for the next one. Toodaloo.